Mercury retrograde in Cancer doesn't exist alone. It's interconnected. Think of it like a Hawaiian lei. Every cycle around it, its own flower, strung onto the one before and the one after. Mercury entered its shadow zone near the Gemini New Moon and stations retrograde on the Capricorn Full Moon. It goes combust with the Cancer New Moon and stations direct along with the Sun entering Leo. In this first part of my Mercury retrograde in Cancer series, I string together exactly how this retrograde connects us to Jupiter entering Leo and Venus entering Libra. So you know how all of these energies are interconnected. This was recorded inside my Star Powered Circle Masterclass, my global community for changemakers and leaders, and you're welcome to join us. Let's string our cosmic lay together with this Mercury retrograde in Cancer. I'm Leslie Tagorda, a business astrologer and creator of the Astro Brand Method, blending more than 20 years of brand strategy with the precision of astrology to help entrepreneurs and underrepresented leaders make their mark. I think second to new moons, Mercury retrogrades are like my next favorite thing to talk about because they're really nothing to be feared. To me, Mercury retrogrades are such huge opportunities that exist for us to really get to recalibrate and redo. And you know by now that as we've been working in astrology, it's like these transits, these cycles, they don't happen in silos, right? They don't just happen like, oh, here's a Mercury retrograde. Well, this Mercury retrograde is integrated with all of our lunations that we had recently, right? When we had the new moon in Gemini, Mercury was in Cancer and getting ready to enter the shadow zone. So that new moon in Gemini was related to this Mercury retrograde. And then, this Mercury retrograde stations retrograde means stops and shifts gears into retrograde on the day of the Capricorn full moon. Right. And so Ishelle's going to be doing her wonderful full moon gathering for the community building. And a few days later, that's when we already talked about this, but that's when Jupiter moves into Leo. And so because these are not happening in these silos, these are all intersected. This Mercury retrograde is like, okay, we talked about Gemini new moon and how do we want to create a new cycle of emotional connection and some vulnerability in our own communications, in our business, in our marketing, even interpersonally to create deeper bonds. But then the love and the joy and the resistance of what it means when, people that are underrepresented and us as women leaders, us as like women of color leaders, how can we really create the courage, create the emotional security and confidence that comes from doing the things that we truly love, approaching things from play. So we're having all of this intersection of getting to redo and rethink. And, over the last couple of weeks, because we have been in the retro shade zone, I want you to really start thinking about like, what has happened, what has needed to be redone in terms of like how you want to communicate. And the reason why we communicate is so that we can connect. So again, this is just kind of like putting everything into perspective, this page in terms of like how everything is connected. Being from Hawaii, I love to think of these each of these kinds of transits as they're weaving together as a lei. A lei is like those strings of flowers that we wear, and they're all interconnected. They exist together on this beautiful circle, this string. And lastly, when Mercury, and we'll talk about all the different dates coming up, when Mercury finally ends and retraces past its retrograde cycle, it closes just as Venus enters her home sign of Libra. And so, what I find really beautiful about this is Libra is the sign of relationships and connections. And she is saying, hey, you have done all of this work to strengthen your ability to connect, to strengthen your ability to Be vulnerable about the stories that make you more relatable, about the stories that allow other people to open up to you. We don't share like our stories. Well, I don't want anybody to share their stories in terms of like trauma bonding and like, triggers and like kind of like clickbait. I want people to share their stories from this real intimate place of heart, because when we share parts of ourselves, it allows other people to want to open up and share parts of themselves. So thank you again. If this podcast has touched your heart, please share it with others. Please leave me a rating and review so we can reach the hearts of even more change makers like you.